And that's where I really felt being Indian is low-key a liability in school. Here's the thing, when you are South Asian, this is my theory, you actually don't hate the way you are. You strongly dislike the way you were perceived. Growing up brown or desi in the Middle East is like you're too Indian to belong here, but you're not Indian enough to belong in your home country. You're sort of stuck in this limbo. It's almost like being brown in the Middle East in itself is its own identity. And it's a very unique feeling, which is really hard to articulate. And I'm going to attempt to talk about this in today's video.
Third culture kid. I belong everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
I don't know why, but I was a bit weirdly nervous to make this video because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to express what I wanted to express in this video, because the feeling I'm going to be talking about in this video is kind of hard to articulate and it's hard to communicate. But I know that if you've been on the receiving end, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Hi, if you're new here, my name's Maryam. The intention with today's video is to make you feel seen, heard, and understood. And if you're a South Asian kid who grew up in the Middle East, whether it's in the UAE or Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, like wherever it is, this is your video to watch when you want to feel heard and when you want to feel like you're not the only one who feels like they have a mini identity crisis whenever anyone asks them where they're from.
A third culture kid. I grew up with the identity crisis.
I just feel like it's a topic worth discussing, and while yes, there are way bigger problems in the world, identity and your sense of belonging is a real thing, and I think it's worth talking about. And if you do like this video, please give this video a thumbs up, because when you support my channel, when you support this video, it reaches as many people as possible. And also subscribe to my channel if you aren't already. Growing up brown in the Middle East is a very interesting feeling because there are so many of us over here. You do have like your mini community here and you do feel like you have that sense of belonging here, but you are reminded through subtle or not so subtle signs that you don't fully belong here. This is not the country that you can call your own, because you don't get the passport here, whether you are born here, whether you live here for your entire life. Like that's just not how it works. Like for example, if you're born in the USA, in the UK, you are eligible to get the passport and you can call that country your own and you can just live there, but it's not the same over here. And while there are pros and cons to like living here and like other countries, it's just a very interesting experience when you're a kid born and raised here, but like when you get to being an adult, you can't really claim the country as your own. It makes you feel like you don't really have a base secured for yourself. One of the basic needs for human beings is to have that sense of belonging. And when that sense of belonging does not feel concrete, I think the feeling you feel when that's the case is not something that can be easily brushed away. There has to be one point in your life where you have a conversation about this with your friends, because that feeling of never fully belonging anywhere, it stays with you. The code switching becomes exhausting.
Third culture kids, everywhere we go, we don't really feel like we belong.
And for anyone who doesn't know, code switching is basically when you change the way you talk, the way you carry yourself, depending on which environment you're in or who you're around. And when you're constantly doing that at home, at school, when you're abroad, like it can get exhausting. Okay, so let's start with describing me a bit. So I'm born and raised here in the UAE. I was born in Abu Dhabi. I lived there until I was 11 years old, and I went to a fully Indian school in Abu Dhabi. If you are from there, you might know the school. It was called Addis, and I was there until the 4th grade. When I was there, I mean, I was literally surrounded by Indians all the time, and I felt like I was in the right place, because when you're a kid, I feel like you don't really question these things as much, like sense of belonging, all that kind of stuff. Like you kind of just go with the flow, I think. I mean, that's the experience I had as well, so I couldn't be biased. I never really felt out of place at that time. Then after that, my parents decided to put myself and my brother in an international school.
50K to cousins, post the caption, pray none of my enemies hold me captive. I grieve different.
And so I went from being surrounded by people that looked and sounded like me 24/7 to being in a school where there were way more people, as in terms of nationalities, there were way more cultures, and it was just different. Like people sounded different, people wrote in a different way. Like for example, when I was in Indian school, I used to write in cursive all the time, and that's what my hand was used to. But when I went to an international school, it was kind of seen as uncool to write in that way, and like kids would make fun of me and be like, why are you writing like that? And I feel like when you're a kid, these things matter to you so much. So like I changed my entire handwriting style. I remember I was like 9 years old, 9 or 10, thinking that okay, I need to write in block letters now. It's just so funny. I just remember that. Also, when I went to an international school, that's when I developed my accent now, my international school accent.
Third culture kids. Of course, everyone we meet thinks we're American.
That's where I was like exposed to like different cultures, and that's where I became hyper aware, or actually more aware of my ethnicity and like me being Indian and me being different as in like I wasn't around the same kind of people all the time. And then after that, we moved to Dubai, and that's where I'm living now. I was 12 and I was in Dubai until I graduated high school, which was 17/18, and then I moved away to uni. I was in London for 7.5 years. The amount of time I spent in Dubai and the amount of time I spent in London is actually kind of the same. And when I moved to Dubai, it was like whoa, because there were way more people in my school here. And that's where I really felt being Indian is low-key a liability in school. It's so funny because at the time I felt like being Indian made me less cool, made me less likable, because that was the experiences you face when you're in school. Like, I remember one time, it's so funny, it's so silly, this boy liked me, but then he said he didn't like me anymore because he found out I was Indian. And it's like, that is wild to me. And that kind of stuff right now wouldn't impact me, but as a kid, you internalize everything. This is something no one would even talk about. And I remember like talking to a friend who's also Indian. She's also like me, you know, Indian, but like has lived here all her life. And she had the exact same experience, like the experience I did in school, but like we never talked about it, even as kids. As kids, I feel like you don't know how to articulate your feelings really well. I don't really think most kids know how to do that. And we were teenagers. So like as teenagers, I feel like it was cool to let things go. It was cool to like brush things off. That was the experience I had. But even as a kid, when I would like brush things off, I still remember feeling super conscious about like my race and like who I was. It feels good to talk about right now because right now I'm at a space where I'm so comfortable and I'm so proud of who I am. And that's why I make so many videos about South Asian related stuff on my channel. Like I love talking about my culture. I am so proud of it. I'm so proud of the jewelry. Wink, wink. I'm in a total different space now, but it's so interesting to look back and see like how I used to feel when I was a kid. Here's the thing, when you are South Asian, this is my theory, you actually don't hate the way you are. You strongly dislike the way you were perceived. It's funny, like when you're in school, everyone would like call you names, ask you why your lunch would smell, like say all these things about you. But then like when we grew up, we would see like all these Western fashion houses stealing from our culture, stealing from our heritage, stealing the things that they made fun of when we were little. And that's why I made all those videos about like the West stealing from South Asian fashion, because I felt so strongly about it, because I remember how I felt when I was a kid.
Because you know in a moment they could all.
And then like when I grew up, those feelings are still there because I never talked about it and I never processed it until I did. And so that's why I felt so passionately about talking about when other cultures would steal from our culture. It just felt so liberating talking about those things, because at the end of the day, South Asian couture is beautiful. The culture is beautiful. It's so rich. It's so meaningful. I'm so proud to be a part of it. But when I was a kid, it just felt like a liability. I know how it sounds. It sounds so weird and a bit bad to say, but it's the truth. That's how so many of us felt as a kid. It wasn't cool to be Indian. It wasn't cool to be brown. I say Indian because I'm Indian, but I'm talking about other South Asian nationalities. I don't want to make any of you feel left out. So that's a bit of how I felt when I was in school, when I was a kid. And now that I'm back in Dubai, because after spending 7.5 years in the UK, I decided to move back to Dubai. It just feels good to be back here and know that I can live here. I can get a visa here easily and it won't be a big issue, because I feel like a shared experience so many of us have is just like, you know, fear or this anxiety related to visas. The whole visa thing is just so, I feel strongly about it, and that's why I love Shah Rukh Khan's movie Donkey. I feel like when you watch that movie, you really get to see how many people struggle with visas and how it can be such a big deal for so many of us. All these things are, at the end of the day, they're all man-made. None of these things are divine. So we'll talk more about that later on in the video, but that's something I want to talk about. When I moved back here, I felt like I could actually be here and be chill and not be stressed about my visa, because when I was in the UK, I was working on the tier 4 visa, I believe. I was working a job, and with the visa situation there, like luckily I was able to get it and I was able to maintain it with the new regulations and all that. But it just got to a point where I felt like I was just fighting to be recognized like everyone else, when the same country literally stole so much from my country, British. Like they literally took millions and billions and trillions. Like it just felt so weird. And then like the whole narrative over there where like they would make it seem like, oh, you're stealing our jobs. And it's like, we're literally coming to your country and getting jobs based off your own rules, when you literally stole so much from our own countries. If you hadn't done it in the first place, do you really think we'd be here? Do you see what I mean? They're literally living off the wealth that they stole from us not too long ago. And then they have the audacity to call us stealers of their jobs. It's like, It makes no sense. And also when I was living in the UK, when I was in London for those 7 years, when anyone would ask me where I'm from, I would say Dubai because they wanted to know where I was born and raised. But then I would always caveat it by saying, but I'm actually Indian. And it's funny now when anyone asks me where I'm from, depending on who is asking me, if it's like someone I'm actually getting to know, if it's a friend, I will like give them the whole spiel. I would be like, oh yeah, I'm Indian, but I've actually never lived in India, but I'm born and raised in UAE, but I lived in the UK for 7 years. I would give them the whole spiel. But if it's someone I'm just meeting in passing, like, you know, like a barista or like a waiter, or if someone's just wondering where I'm from, I will just say India because it just feels easier. But then even with that, I say easier, then they're like, oh, but you have a different accent. Where does that come from? Then I say, oh yeah, I went to an international school in the UAE and then I lived in the UK. It's just so funny. People are always curious. I think it's okay for them to be curious, but I think what we feel is like this weird sense of like, what do we say? What do we say that will feel like a one answer, one flat answer? But that's the thing, like, why do we feel like we have to have just one answer? Like, that's not our reality. It's okay for us to have multiple answers. And like, I want to talk about something else later on in today's video where like people would make me feel like I was ashamed of my culture when I used to say Dubai, but that's actually not the point. That was actually not the reason. But we'll talk about that more later into the video. I have so many friends that are not Desi. I have so many friends that are like Arab or different parts of the world. We often tend to discuss the topic about visas and passports because when we were in the UK, my friends and I, we obviously had to like, you know, work for our visas, like, you know, to work there. And when we live here, we have to work for our visas to live here, even though we were born and raised here. So we always feel like we're working towards just being able to live in a place where we've always lived. And like, you can take all of this and use it as a reason to wallow and be sad, or you can use it to actually work harder. And like, I was having this conversation with one of my friends before, literally a few days ago, where I said that me not being able to get a job in the UK as easily as others made me work 10 times harder, made me work literally 10 times harder. And then I was able to, because that just made me work harder than like my peers. Okay, now I want to talk about growing up in Dubai before it was Dubai. Like, you know how Dubai is right now. And I know today's video is a bit like, you know, tiny bit all over the place with like my storytelling, but this topic is just so vast and there's just so much I want to talk about. So I'm just gonna share things as they come to me. So like, does anyone else remember this? If you like, you know, were born and raised in the UAE, if you're a late 90s kid like me, where when you were a kid, you would come to Dubai to have fun and you'd go to Burjuman and you'd go to Toby's and you'd play in like the soft play area and then you'd have your favorite snacks later, like Sohar chips. Like, that to me was the Dubai core or the UAE core childhood for kids that were third culture kids. And third culture kids is basically when you've never lived in the passport country of your parents. That's like the simplest definition I can give for it. Okay, now I want to talk about passports and how a piece of document can be the end all and be all of your sense of belonging, because it's so funny how many people don't claim the UAE or they don't claim it to be a part of them even though they've been in the country for so long, they're born and raised here, because they don't have the passport. They don't have a piece of document to validate their actual lived experience. It's so interesting to me because I have come across people who have Canadian passport and they don't actually feel Canadian at all because they've never lived there or they're not born and raised there. They just got it through, you know, their parents or through other ways. The reason I bring this up is that in their case, the passport doesn't make them feel more Canadian. You know, they actually don't relate to the country at all. And so I just shared these two examples to show you that in one case, it doesn't give you any sense of belonging at all. And in one case, you think it's all you need to feel that sense of belonging. See what I mean? I remember when I was in the UK and like I would be around friends and when anyone would ask me where I'm from, and if I would first say Dubai, they would make it seem like I was ashamed of being Indian, when that was not the case, and that is not the case. Yes, it could have been the case when I was a kid and when people made me feel ashamed, but that wasn't the case anymore when I grew up and when I realized everything that was going on. When they would say that, I used to think, but I'm not. I'm just sharing my reality, the reality of how I lived my life. And I would always caveat that by saying, but I'm actually Indian. But they made it seem like, why don't you just say India? And it's like, I would just say that if that was my reality, but my reality actually reflects something totally different. I would be doing a disservice to my lived experience if I didn't share Dubai or like the UAE or Abu Dhabi, you know what I mean? And it's so funny, like many people would make me feel like I was being ashamed, and I felt like I needed their validation in order to be able to actually be true to like where I am from. Those people, the ones who would say that to me, now looking back and now that I have the maturity, the emotional maturity that I do, they were actually just projecting because they themselves didn't feel secure in their own identity. Because if you did, you would have no qualms with anyone else being upfront about their own. Why were they so suppressed at the end of the day. They had no reason to be, but they just were. And it's so interesting, like one of my friends, she was sharing her story where when she went to uni in a different country, she's also like me by the way, born and raised in the UAE, but she's actually Indian. So when she went to another country and she met Indian people that were actually born and raised in India, they didn't see her as Indian enough because she wasn't born and raised there. Even though, for example, she loved Bollywood more than them, or she loved the culture more than them. Not that that validates anything, but do you see what I mean? Like, even though she was so in tune with everything, they really didn't see her as Indian enough. And I make this point to show that like you're never going to be enough for anyone. And I know how it sounds, but like people are always going to have their own projections, their own limitations, their own limiting belief that they're going to project onto you. But when it comes to your identity, this is what I have learned. You need to stop seeking validation from others, be it human beings or even a piece of document, because those things, people and paper and all those things, they're not divine. They're not set in stone by God. At the end of the day, everything that we're talking about here is man-made. I may lose some of you right now because it might seem like I'm talking a bit, you know, wishy-washy, but it's true. And the truth oftentimes feels a bit weird to hear because, you know, it's not the nicest thing to hear all the time. It's the truth at the end of the day. In order for you to feel comfortable in who you are, in order for you to feel comfortable in your own identity, you need to stop looking for validation from like other sources and actually reclaim your own narrative. If anyone, your friends, your family, or your colleagues, anyone in your life, if anyone's made you feel uncomfortable in actually claiming yourself fully and actually talking about where you're from fully, then that's not yours to receive. Other people's discomfort is not yours to absorb. Yes, I'm fully and proudly Indian, but I also carry a big part of the Middle East with me because this is where my life has been, and also a piece of London as well. And holding all these identities doesn't make me any less Indian or any less proud, because that's what people made me feel before, and that's what I used to absorb before. But it's not true. I can and you can actually reclaim your own narrative. We can reclaim our own narratives, and all of these things just makes me uniquely me, and it makes you uniquely you. I feel like this is such a long video and I've talked so much, and I just really hope by the end of the video you feel heard, seen, and understood, and you understand yourself better and your friends better. And I just hope after watching today's video you feel that you can talk about these things with more confidence. Yeah, I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
You're gone now. Will you come